Hello, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to our session, Female Leadership, Techno-entrepreneurship, and Peace at this year's Geneva Peace Week. My name is Muyi Yang. I'm a Rotary Peace Fellow and social entrepreneur based in Uppsala, Sweden. I have worked with community building projects in the US, UK, China, Syria, and now in Sweden. My work has been focusing on using the new technologies to promote social reconciliation, gender equality, and peace. As a techno-entrepreneur and a long-standing supporter of female leadership myself, I have constantly amazed by the amazing work that have been done by my female teammates and the unique perspectives they have brought to the table. At the same time, I still see lots of social and institutional difficulties that brought the obstacles to the way that female leaders can progress, particularly in traditionally male-dominated fields like technological innovation, entrepreneurship, and peace building. So today, I am honored to have invited three amazing female leaders in this field. Vidhya, you have to excuse me to pronounce your last name. Vidhya Ramalingam. She is the founder of Moonshot CVE, which is an organization that uses technology to disrupt and counter violent extremism globally. She has led Moonshot CVE to respond to violent extremism via innovative online intervention programs to pull individuals out of violent movements and the use of automated messaging to disrupt the formation of cyber hate groups. We also have Karen Bernstein today. She is the former British Foreign and Commonwealth Office's political advisor on the Middle East peace process in Israel, and is a civilian peacekeeper for the United Nations missions in Nepal and South Sudan. Right now, she is the program lead of the Decoding Dehumanization project at Beyond Conflict. And we also have Branka Panic. She's the founder and executive director of AI for Peace, a nonprofit think tank that ensures artificial intelligence benefits peace, security, and sustainable development, and where diverse voices influence the creation of AI and related technologies. I'm very excited to present you these three amazing female role models. And right now, I'm going to pass the floor to all of them. So Branka and Vidhya and Karen, could you start giving us a brief introduction, like what you have been doing and how you end up where you are right now?
Thank you, Muyi. Thank you for such a nice introduction. And of course, it's my pleasure to be here with Vidhya and Karen. And it's often a very difficult question to answer, like how did you end up where you are now? There are so many factors that influence this. And I certainly think that my personal background and the fact that I grew up in an area that was affected by wars and conflict influenced my choice to work in peace building. And I'm from Serbia originally, from Southeast Europe, and then seeing, especially in the last decade, how technologies are impacting peace and conflict and violence. I think that brought me to this intersection of technologies and peace building. And if I have to pinpoint one thing that had a very big influence on what I'm doing now, meaning AI for peace, that's certainly what we share, and that's Rotary International Peace Fellowship Program that brought me from Europe to US 3 years ago, I got this chance as a Rotary Fellow to do this research on utilizing artificial intelligence concretely and machine learning for peace building. And through this, I started working with a data team as well in Washington, D.C. that was utilizing machine learning to predict the probability of famine happening in conflict areas. And I think these moments together with people that I met throughout this path influenced the decision to start AI for Peace as a platform for all peace builders and data scientists to work together towards more peaceful societies with utilizing new technologies.
Thank you so much, Branka. And Vidhya, could you let us know, like, how did you get to where you are today?
I share Branka's same, challenge with this question, that it's always very difficult to know exactly, what stages of your journey really led to who you are now and exactly what you do now. I suppose the most important thing to start with is to say, I never had ambitions to create a company. If you had told me 10 years ago that I would be an entrepreneur, and even the word entrepreneur just even today doesn't settle with me neatly. If you had told me that I would be running a company with a team of 50 delivering projects around the world, I would have laughed and shook my head. I got into the space working on extremism, hate, and terrorism about 10 years ago. I decided to go on a mission to meet with white nationalists. I wanted to understand them. I wanted to understand what it was that got people into these sorts of kind of worldviews, but also what got them into these movements. And that experience was really transformational for me. I really started to understand people that are potential perpetrators as human beings. And I started to understand what got them there, and also importantly, how they might change, what we could do to actually intervene along the way. And I was really catapulted into the counterterrorism space in 2011 when an attack took place in Norway. Many of you might remember an attack by a right-wing terrorist, and suddenly European leaders realized they needed to respond. So I led the EU's first intergovernmental initiative to respond to that form of terrorism. And my ambitions for Moonshot really grew out of frustration. It was a feeling of limitations and a lack of understanding in the field around the uses of technology, and especially the uses of technology for good. A lot of the work I saw being done, even in the online space, I felt, frankly, was unethical. And my feeling was really that the internet is and can be a positive force for change. It's allowing us to connect across borders in ways we've never seen before. And it's people who abuse and use the internet in ways which create harm, not the technology itself. And to me, that problem was solvable. So I started to think with my co-founder, well, how can we harness technology to bring out the best in humanity rather than the worst? And to try and create the sort of encounters online which can really start to change people's minds and move them towards a more positive outcome if they're considering violence. If there had been another organization or company out there that offered what I wanted to do, I would have absolutely worked there. But I felt the need at the time to create what I didn't see in the field. And maybe just an important learning for me on that is you don't need to conceive of yourself as an entrepreneur to end up in a position like this. Sometimes your drive to start something can just be about filling a gap or fixing something you see is wrong, or just ensuring there's a better option out there for others who are like-minded and see solutions like you do.
What an amazing story. Thank you so much, Vidhya, for sharing with us. Now, Karen, would you mind sharing a little bit story of where you have been and how you get to where you are today?
Yeah, of course. And I'm really honored to be on this panel with Branka and Vidhya. I have to say that their stories and their work is really inspirational. So just want to put that emotional point out there. Like Branka, also, I grew up in a conflict zone. I was born in Israel. And so I've always felt that I wanted to work on addressing conflict and its consequences on the many lives that are affected by it. So when I graduated college, I left for Ireland, where I worked at a reconciliation center. And then I got a master's degree through the generosity of the Rotary World Peace Scholarship. And then became, as you mentioned, Muyi, a civilian peacekeeper for UN missions, a political advisor in the Middle East peace process. But through these roles, I also realized how frustrating it was by the fact that peace building was really a long-term objective, and there was no real sense of knowing how you measure the impact that our initiatives were having. It takes a long time to change perceptions and to create behavioral change, and any small or fragile situation can hamper that and lead to an eruption of violence. So I wanted to find a project that I could understand more about what we would be able to accomplish before we expanded it on the large scale. And that's what led me to join Beyond Conflict as the program advisor, and where I lead a project aimed at reducing dehumanization and conflict in Nigeria between Christian and Muslim communities. And I work alongside researcher and academic, Dr. Rebecca Littman. And what we do is we use randomized control trials to identify specific factors that are impactful and that can be used to create large science-informed, evidence-based interventions. And I could tell you a little bit more about that later.
Thank you so much, Karen. And I'm pretty sure right now already, like, our audience would have so many questions. But I just want you to throw out the question we collected before. And we actually, many people have asked us, like, what is the difficulty, like, being a female in the fields, such as entrepreneurship, such as peace building, that, as I introduced before, are traditionally male dominated. What are the institutional barriers or like structural obstacles that embedded in our society that you personally have either experienced or heard to actually hamper the development of female leaders in those fields? And if so, how did you overcome those obstacles? Could you share with us? And can we start with Karen this time?
Yeah, I think in many parts of the world, there still exists this idea that a woman's leadership is not as powerful as that of a man. So I remember the time where for a short stunt of time, I was the officer in charge of the UN mission in South Sudan's state office. And I would lead weekly meetings with all of the different sections. And we had agreed on the urgency to launch a multi-sectoral campaign to stop land grabbing. And I recall that, there were several men at the table that simply didn't think that any initiative that I would oversee was really worthy of their time. And I would say that at the end all, not just that situation, but overall, as I age and I learn more from my life experiences, I think you just need to take that seat at the table. And as a woman, you don't have to excuse yourself for not being worthy enough to sit at it, or even lead the people around that table. You just need to come up with ideas and provide insights and then push forward. And then you have to remember that, you deserve to be there. You deserve to be leading the team. You have just as many qualifications as anyone else, and that you'll make mistakes, but you just keep going and you keep your head high.
What a strong message. Thank you, Karen, for sharing with us and for inspiring so many other potential young female leaders in the future. And Branka, could you share with us like your insight on this topic?
Sure. Well, I will definitely echo everything that Karen said. And I think some things are very different in different contexts. I think often the women leadership is the same across the world, across different countries and different cultures. So many countries have this problem of including women. And I think, Muyi, your question is really to the point, because we have a sort of a triple layer of structural obstacles here. When we talk about technology as such, this field has a problem. When we talk about entrepreneurship, we have a problem. Peace building as well. This is a field, when I first entered the field, I actually entered the international security field. So you can imagine it's really male dominated. And then how I was switching, through entrepreneurship and tech field, I see this structural obstacles repeating all the time. And I think a very crucial thing is actually bringing some transparency to these issues. And I will again connect to what Karen said in her last response in terms of evidence and data. I'm really a big fan of evidence and data, and I will just bring in some numbers, Muyi, here maybe to illustrate to the audience how important this topic is. I found this data that women currently make only 24% of the computer science workforce, although in education, while entering the universities and faculties, their number is much bigger than this. So you have to ask yourself, what is happening here? Why is this number so low? And then when we dig deeper, we look more data in this field, we see that median salaries of these women are only 66% of the salaries of their male counterparts. So this was a sort of a revealing moment for me in my own experience as well, when I realized how I am paid compared to my male counterparts when we started transparently talking about this, which is not often the case. In many cultures, in many industries, you actually don't have this information. But once you have it, you are actually able to then discuss it in a way how you will organize this session now, hopefully to bring more clarity to this topic. I think this is crucial to do. And when we look into specific industries in tech, look at big companies and all of the data that is available in that sense, how many women actually work. For example, in Google announced this transparently in 2018, only 21% of their technical roles are filled with women. And then when we look into representation of minorities or people of color, we see that this number is even lower. And then if we combine the women and Black women and see how their representation is, so we see that the problem is becoming bigger and bigger. But I'm hopeful that talking about this and calling organizations accountable, teams accountable, managers accountable to this, just explaining why is this the situation, we will actually advance the field in the way we want to advance it.
That is the hope of me for having this session as well. Hopefully this is not a one-shot session. Hopefully today, what we have is a good start of something bigger. It's a bigger change for the whole industry in both techno-innovation, in both peace building, and also in entrepreneurship. But so let's turn the floor to Vidhya. So Vidhya is very interesting because you are a woman, you are a leader, but you are also a person of color. And you chose to work not with what we would call the victims of sexism or racism, but you just went directly into the pool of those what we might call white supremacists. That is not the easy route, even for many men to take. So could you share with us like your experience of suffering, or probably witnessing at least, the being a female, particularly being a female of color? Like what you have seen, what you have experienced, and how you have overcome those.
Yeah, absolutely. Both my gender and my ethnic background have really shaped my experiences over the last decade and my entry into this work. That's both. My identity has shaped my interaction with the subject matter, being someone who has been targeted by these movements directly and who regularly, even today, receives quite a high level of online trolling from white supremacist groups based on the work I do and based on how outspoken I am about the work I do. And that's certainly in comparison to my other colleagues, both my male colleagues, and there's all sorts of statistics out there around evidencing the fact that female leaders are more likely to experience that sort of trolling than men are. And so my experience has certainly been in line with those findings. So it shapes every aspect of my day-to-day. And a lot of the obstacles and the barriers that Karen and Branka mentioned apply very much for me too. I mean, the barriers are constant. And I've been running Moonshot with a male co-founder, and I should also say a white male co-founder. So we're a multi-ethnic and multi-gender co-founding team. And it's been in many ways like running my own experiment for the last 5 years, seeing our experiences side by side in almost all of the same scenarios and looking at how we're interacted with differently, treated differently, and some of the perceptions and stereotypes which dictate how people interact with us. Some of this plays out in ways which are really subtle, and I imagine some of my experiences might be shared by both Karen and Branka. I've been in meetings where no one looks me in the eye, but are only looking at my male counterparts, even if they're more junior to me. A client who doesn't address questions to me, but will only address my co-founder, even if I've done most of the speaking in the meeting. And some of it isn't even sinister. It's oftentimes based on the underlying biases we hold. I mean, even with my own staff at Moonshot, over the years, I've seen very subtle differences in how both my co-founder and I are engaged with our team. And that's a team that I really trust and believe hold ethics and beliefs around equality at their heart. But a lot of this is underlying biases that are really hard to even pinpoint in ourselves. But sometimes it's even more explicit. And I think the moment for me where this really crystallized was a moment years ago at the start of Moonshot. Someone told me, it was just when my co-founder and I were starting out, someone told me, let your co-founder do the selling, going out there and selling the vision for Moonshot. You'll be really great at taking care of the back shop, making sure everything's happening, back in the office. And that advice really sat with me, and it sat with me kind of difficultly, and it irked me for so long. And I somehow knew it wasn't right or accurate, but it took me years to realize I was actually really good at selling our vision for the business. I was really good at securing new projects, new partnerships for Moonshot. And in fact, some years I've secured far more new partnerships than anyone else did in the business. And what I realized over time was, I was able to do this my way. I wasn't pushing myself to become someone else. I wasn't pushing myself to mirror any other form of leadership that was conventionally understood to be kind of powerful within the field. And I guess to Karen's point, stereotypes around what makes a good leader in tech and in entrepreneurship are so powerful and so domineering. And it's really important to recognize there are other ways of doing business, other ways of being successful, and to be true to yourself and find what's going to make you a strong leader without emulating anything else that you're told makes people a good leader.
That is such a strong message. And again, that echoes what we all discussed before. We hope this is, by talking about these things, by exposing these experiences or even these underlying biases, we could actually make more people aware that this is the problem we have in these fields, and this is a good start. We need to change it. We need to actually expose it. We need to highlight them before we can actually do something about them. And so I want to say again that I appreciate all of you for standing here, for sharing your stories, and for joining me on this mission to make a change. And also, Vidhya, I think this is a great moment that based on what you shared, what is unique, like perspective, like all of you have experienced that, like you brought to the table, you contributed to the team, that you think the your male coworkers, or colleagues have benefited. So I think that is also something I personally want to know as well. So first, could you maybe Branka, do you mind to start sharing on this topic?
Sure. I think this is quite obvious for all of us being women, first of all. I think that's a crucial thing to have women representation in your teams, whatever you're doing. It doesn't have to be entrepreneurship. I think we bring a very anybody brings this specificity and different points of view and different life experience, and then especially with the things that we are doing with entrepreneurship that are related to social problems or big challenges that we are tackling. I think we need this type of diversity. We need to bring this to the table. And I heard this very interesting expression recently that I wanted to share with audience, like, even when it seems, what often male entrepreneurs will present that the table is too small for everybody to be represented because our societies are so diverse. We have the ways to bring our folding chairs, you know, so I think this is the way to go. We just need to give voices to people, and this would be the thing that we bring to the table. Yeah.
Can I just follow up on that, Branka? So you work specifically with AI, and particularly on the ethics of AI. I mean, we will go back to this topic later, but for now, just briefly, could you give us an example, like being a female leader in this field? What is the unique contribution that you think your, let's say, gender identity has contributed when exploring the ethics of AI?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of examples, and one reason that I would like to mention is definitely the advances that we have in facial recognition technology, for example, and how many companies are piloting this technology in many fields, among others in policing. And this is the example where we saw how important it is to have women at the table to actually not only test the technology in the moment when it comes to the application phase, but the design as well. Because what a group of scientists discovered starting to test the technology is that the technology is not that successful in recognizing female features as male. And that comes directly from the fact that these technologies are created predominantly by white 20 years or 30 years old men. This is a huge problem that we realized and that we didn't actually recognize at the moment of the design. Once women started testing the technology, and then again, I'm coming back to this issue of especially women of color who are discriminated in this process on so many levels, including this one, because the technology was proved flawed, not only recognizing women features, but especially recognizing people of color, not being able to recognize them. And then we had the recent case in New York, I believe, of wrongfully accused person just because of the facial recognition did it wrong in the policing. So this person was wrongfully accused for the crime that they didn't commit. So this is one of the examples. Why is it so important to have this, not only gender, I know this is the topic of this session, but to have the diversity in general and to have the voices of women included, especially now when we talk about things, Muyi mentioned this, artificial intelligence, and how we see that these systems are being automated in decision making.
That is a really concrete example of, and also it sounds a little bit scary as well if we do not have the female leader voices on the table in designing this facial recognition, particularly female leaders from people of color. What kind of outcome, what kind of future are we actually seeing ourselves marching into? That is really something creepy to even think about.
I think Muyi, very dystopian one for many, and that's the thing. And I just want to go back to what Vidhya mentioned at the beginning. The same technology can be used for good and in a malicious way. And I don't want to say that automatically we need to just generalize about all facial recognition technologies that they are bad. It really depends how we are making them, and this is this moment of ethics that you mentioned. If we introduce ethical standards in all of the phases of the development of the technology, I actually think that we can have huge benefits of applying this. And there are cases of utilizing facial recognition for fighting human trafficking, for example, finding the victims of human trafficking, which is really important a challenge that our world is facing today. So the more ethical we approach to this issue, the bigger benefits we can have from the technology we are utilizing. And
I definitely agree with you, Branka. And I think the potential of technologies is so big that we all work with techno-innovations in one way or another, and we all know that they can bring us such a brighter future if we actually, as you said, if we involve more people, if we actually ensure the diversity when we design and utilize those technologies. And again, female voices. are absolutely indispensable in this whole process. And that is, I think, the perfect time for us to turn to Karen to give us more examples, like to highlight the importance of involving female voices. Particularly, could you give us some examples, because you work with right now dehumanization project in Nigeria, and that is also a very sensitive topic. And being a female in the field with a bunch of people, and I probably would say many of them are males when you come to the negotiation tables between the conflicting side. What is the unique perspective and the contribution that you and your female coworkers have brought to reconcile the conflict between the two groups, between the Muslims and the Christians, in your work?
Well, Muyi, I think that that there's a lot to be said about the fact that that gender is an important contributor in terms of perhaps why we have arrived at the decision to be sensitive to the needs of vulnerable populations in conflict. So women are disproportionately affected, and the UN recently, in its assessment of 75-year commemoration, talked about the fact that in relation to SDG 16 that deals with peace, there are just still a huge gap in the number of women who sit at the peace negotiation tables. And so, I'd like to echo what Branka just said, which is that without diversity, gender, ethnic, what have you, you just simply cannot have the perspectives that are present in dealing with problems and then coming up with solutions, because it's just a very one-sided, myopic vision of what that problem is, and it's important to take that into consideration. So I think that I'd mention foremost.
Actually, very inspiring after hearing what Branka said. We need the diversity, and now we heard from you, Karen, that how you tried your best to make sure to involve as many people as possible from different perspectives. That really is a good start that we want to see more in the future. But let's turn to Vidhya. Vidhya, you gave us a brief mentioning of the different leading styles and also the different responses you have received from both your clients, but also from your own employees. So could you give us a more concrete example in terms of styles between you and your, let's say, white male partner? What is the unique, what is the distinctive feature that you think stand your leading style apart?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'll start by saying anything I say about my leadership style is not just based on my gender, my experiences as a woman, but are also based on, all aspects of my personality and who I am. So I also want to make sure in this conversation that we don't create too many silos around what men do and what women do and what is a woman's leadership style versus a man's leadership style, because in many ways, I think that could be unhelpful for us to move forward and expand our conception of what makes a good leader. My personal leadership style is really, based on taking time to reflect. So not rapidly responding, but calm reflection, listening, pushing others to input. I like to be collaborative, and being open-minded. I can be stubborn as a leader, but I also want to ensure that there's enough perspectives brought to the table. I'm not going to claim that that's a woman's style at all. That's my style personally of leadership, but it's certainly not what's understood to be conventional and what's understood to be kind of emblematic of a strong leader. When we think of a strong leader and we think through the sorts of stereotypes that dictate that, it's often someone who's speaking loudly, who's a forceful presence at the table, the person that everyone in the room is looking at all the time to lead them. And I think there are other forms of leadership which are understated, which can oftentimes be more powerful and lead to better outcomes. And I guess to the points that Branka and Karen mentioned, in any field or sector, diversity of perspective and thought is really what pushes forward fields and sectors and allows us to make change. And in any context, bringing together only like-minded people working on a solution is likely to lead to us thinking narrowly. And so in my experience, when I think about my particular, well, one of the fields that I work in, which is really the kind of counterterrorism, prevention of terrorism field, that field has, over the last several decades, been responsible for a lot of harmful decisions which were made, harmful actions which were undertaken in the name of prevention, which ended up stigmatizing certain communities. And to my mind, the reason why we ended up in that scenario was because those people were not at the decision-making table. They were not part of the decision-making process. It was policy that was done to them rather than policy that was done with them. And in many ways, both racial and gender inequality have shaped how terrorism has been historically managed as a threat. And assumptions about communities still plague how many countries, how many organizations also approach preventative work. On the prevention of white supremacy and neo-Nazism, there are still lots of assumptions about gender in particular that shape the way resources are divided in the response. The kind of notion that neo-Nazism is a young man's issue or it's a boy's issue is something that we see often with a lot of the governments that we work with. But in our work, when we're looking at the threat online, we find well over a quarter of the audiences that we're looking at across both Europe and North America and Australasia who are engaging with neo-Nazi content, over a quarter of them are women, and that's not a negligible audience. So I think asking ourselves tough questions about how we work, what we can do, are a good starting point to challenge those sorts of inequalities that end up driving how decisions are made, but also representation at the decision-making table. Those voices need to be present to challenge us to end up leading to more effective and more ethical outcomes. And I guess just to say a few things here about my experiences in the business side of things as an entrepreneur, and how those have shaped my understanding of how businesses need to manage this. Working to kind of inculcate equality and opportunities for women needs to happen deliberately. It won't happen organically or through inertia or just because society is changing around us. People in leadership positions of organizations need to actively try to make this happen. And that's not just around inclusion of women, it's about inclusion across the diversity spectrum. And there are some really practical ways that organizations can do that, and really practical ways that individuals can do that. I know we might chat later through how men can work with us around inclusion. And I've got some really practical strategies that my co-founder and I have developed, even just sitting in a room side by side to deal with some of those really subtle inequalities that I experience in the conversation. So there's a lot that can be done to respond to this, but it's got to be deliberate. It won't happen organically or just because we're seeing society change around us.
That is such a powerful message. And I do agree with you. This is not only about the gender or sex, and this is definitely not trying to reinforce the stereotypes both on women and on men. But this is for me, my intention is to generate a conversation, a dialogue, and to actually make people more aware of the potential problems we have, but also to instill hopes in people's mind using the amazing role model stories like three of you to let people know, no, we are actually marching into a brighter future because of excellent female leaders like you, Branka, like you, Karen, like you, Vidhya, and also with lots of men who are actually actively contributing to make this brighter future a reality. And I think this is also a good timing for us to really ask that question, how men can play a role in making this reality, let's say, come sooner. And for me personally, I'm very, very curious, and I'm very, very interested to know what is the strategies, Vidhya, you have developed with your partner.
Yeah, definitely. The role of men in helping us advance this is so crucial. And I hope it goes without saying, I hope it's really clear that the role of men in advancing technological innovation has been so key over the past many decades, but it's just that that's already taken for granted and known. It's the role of women that's continually underplayed and often denied. So this is not about denying opportunities for any one group of individuals. It's about creating opportunities for those who have often not had them. And men can be really crucial allies in leveling the playing field. And this happens in both small and large ways. So in the small ways, my co-founder and I have found some really practical strategies to deal with those very subtle experiences in meetings. Everything from planning, I mean, we work together before we do any communications to our team to plan our split of speaking time so that we don't end up in a scenario where one of us is speaking more than the other. We have a back and forth, basically structure of conversations when we're both in a conversation with a partner or a client. Even if one of us knows all the answers, I mean, we could both take the meeting on our own. And so we both know all the answers to the questions, but we ensure we're always going back and forth so that the other person has the opportunity to speak. So it's never one of us dominating the conversation. If someone is looking at my co-founder only in a meeting and not looking at me or addressing at me, my co-founder will just look at me in the conversation, which creates a very awkward dynamic where the other person is trying to look directly at him, but he's looking at me and the other person is forced to look at me. So there are really small ways that that men can help ensure that in everything from meetings and conversations that there's opportunities for us to lead. But then also in terms of organizational culture, this is really, I mean, it's every aspect of organizational management that needs to take this into account, everything from recruitment and how we make decisions about hiring through to the kind of broader culture and practices, how we recognize achievements. We release our gender pay gap every 6 months, which as a business, as a British organization, only organizations over 200 staff are required by law to release their gender pay gap. But for us, we're an organization of 50 staff, we release it twice a year. And for us, that's really to hold ourselves accountable and ensure that we're facilitating and allowing for a conversation internally amongst our staff around how to ensure we're working towards these goals.
Thank you so much for sharing this. And it again fills my heart with hopes. Like we have these people, both men and women out there working so hard to make, even what we have right now, making the present a better life. But I also want to hear the same insights from Branka and Karen. So Branka, do you mind sharing with us as well? Like in terms of how men can play a role in creating a better both present and future for us.
Sure. Well, I definitely think, Muyi, as you said, we need to start by inspiring people and even giving them practical examples as we are doing now. And Vidhya, this is really amazing and inspiring to hear how you and your co-founder are doing this. And I'm thinking that we need somehow to make sure that we go, not to say a step further, but to see how we can scale this in a way, in a similar way how we scale good ideas in terms of entrepreneurship. Once we see, as Karen said, once the data is out there that this is actually working, once we have evidence-based proof that this behavior is actually making the impact that we want to make, how we can make sure that this is institutionalized, how we can make sure that this is in the structure of the work that we are doing. So it doesn't depend only on the goodwill of myself as a founder, or Vidhya as a founder, or Karen. We need to help people who don't necessarily have this decision power in their own organizations to be protected and their voices to be heard. So in a way, we need to make sure to come from principles to practice. And I think we are definitely now in the stage where we can make sure that this is institutionalized and this practice is followed. So for years, Muyi, I think that we were just looking for this evidence, and we heard from Karen and Vidhya a lot of examples now in entrepreneurship, how women are valued and how their voices need to be heard. I just want to go back to peace building field as well. And Karen mentioned the 75 years anniversary of United Nations and how we recognize that we are still not at that place or we are still having a gender gap, right, in peace building field. UN is trying to, through different resolutions, to make sure that we have this representation. In peace building, for example, we have proof, we have the real proof when we apply the data and statistical analysis of the previous peace deals and signed peace contracts. We actually saw that there is that they are 35% more likely to be more lasting if the women are at the table. So we reached this conclusion. So how we can now institutionally make sure that we actually have these women at the table. So we really need to come to that point. And I think this is the place where men need to come in. And we often have these movements, in groups of women trying to empower women. And I see that very often now working in AI field is, again, a very new and male-dominated field. We are organizing groups, women in AI ethics, but we need to have men as well as part of these groups. We need to have, this dialogue has to be inclusive in all ways. Why? Why do I think this is the case? Because I, again, see so many situations where there are panels, for example, panel discussions on AI, all men panels or all white men panels. So who is going to change the situation if women are again outside of the table? The men at the table need to raise this issue. So if you, Muyi, are in a session, all men session of something like this, you have the voice to ask the organizers, why is this the case? It's impossible that there was not a single woman in tech available to join the panel. I'm giving just a practical example of how men can also raise their voices, even in situations like this, to actually give a platform to women to show their work and to show not only to be represented, but to actually show that even entrepreneurship will be more successful if women are included. It's not only the matter of inclusiveness, but about the quality as well.
I absolutely agree with you, Branka, that this is really about not only about the, let's say, we want to involve female leaders' voices, but it is also about the quality, the consequence, the outcome of the peace building work we want to have. And as you cited already, there is scientific evidence that the involving female voices, the voices of diversity, would actually ensure a higher quality, a better outcome, and also the duration of the, let's say, peace in all conflictual scenarios. But now let's turn to Karen. Karen, do you mind sharing also with us your insight, like how males could contribute to make this better future come sooner?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that just in terms of the last point that Branka mentioned, in terms of a committee, I actually invited someone recently to speak who is the director of a large international fund to speak to tech entrepreneurs who are focused on innovation geared towards the SDGs. And his response was, I'd be delighted, but I do not speak on panels where there is not gender or geographic diversity. And I was shocked and pleased and just heartened by his response. It's just so rare to have somebody respond to that effect, and it just gave me great admiration for him. So I completely agree that that this is possible and something that everybody can do. I just want to also point the attention on a recent example that you see in newspapers and media all the time in terms of the role of Marty Ginsburg, who was the husband of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and how his support and advocacy for his wife to be a Supreme Court justice was critical in getting her there. It wasn't, for lack of, as we know now, her lack of just being an incredible legal mind, and but in fact, the fact that he went out of his way to ensure that he used his power and influence to get her recognized as to be considered for the position just shows that what happens when men who in fact who often have more power than women, or at least at the in traditional societies and in at the time when Ruth Bader Ginsburg was if you think back to the time where she was graduating Columbia Law School at the top of her class, and no law firm would hire her, and a couple of decades later, still there had been only one Supreme Court justice who was female. Still in context, just like in the United States, there is room for men who have more power, and to advocate for female leadership to be at that table. And I would just add that to something that Branka had mentioned previously that I think is extremely important, is that we should not forget that it should not just be women at the table, but women of diversity. So in the tech entrepreneurship world, if it's just women from the developed world or women, I don't think that diversity is of benefit enough. And if more, and I do see funders today asking questions about gender diversity, about female leadership. I see funders of tech entrepreneurs asking, specifically creating awards for women-led teams. And I think that's admirable and the right way to go. And I'd love to see it go a step further and say that more of these opportunities could go to women in traditional societies, where the challenge of women-led initiatives is even greater hurdle to overcome.
Thank you so much, Karen. And I think both you and me, and all of us, we are waiting to see how that would play out and when can we see a more gender equal future. Time really flies. For me, I personally have so many other questions, and we also have collected so many questions, but let's just focus on the tech side for the last few minutes. So one of the questions we have received from many listeners is, what is the technology that you want to see right now out there?
Yeah, for me, the first thing which comes to, I have two things which come to mind. The first thing which comes to mind is, for me, is predictive modeling, to be actually able to predict violent activity in real life from online activity in the run up to an event, and be able to intervene then to stop violence from happening on the ground. We're not there yet. We don't have large enough data sets that would be required to be able to do that kind of predictive modeling, especially on the forms of violence that we work on. But my hope is in several years' time, we'll be in a position to start to test predictive modeling and be able to prevent violence before it takes place. But I guess the second thing which comes to mind for me is really a problem that's been sitting with me in 2020 in particular. The scale of disinformation that we're dealing with online that ends up leading to violence and discord on the ground is such that it's reaching really mass populations, whether it's health-related disinformation, pandemic-related disinformation, or other fake news. And so many of the methodologies that my organization works on to reach niche audiences online were designed just for that, for reaching very small audiences that have the potential for violence, and to try and offer them safer alternatives or interact with them on a personal level. But with the scale of disinformation, we need new methodologies to reach people at scale and ensure we have the right and the most effective antidote to the exact form of harmful misinformation they're consuming. So for us, we're working now to repurpose advertising technology to be able to deliver and test the sorts of messaging which could be effective. But that's really the next frontier for us as an organization, is finding the most effective digital messaging techniques that can really serve as an antidote to mass disinformation online, and to try and prevent the impacts of that online phenomena on what's happening in the offline world.
Thank you for sharing with us. And Karen, what is that one technology you wish that has been there?
Well, I think I mentioned in my introduction as I've been working in peacebuilding for the last couple of decades, I've more and more become an absolute believer in the importance of having rigorous methodologies to be part of being able to develop and assess the impact of projects. Because I believe that truly, it's difficult to really understand what was accomplished for the peacebuilding project and how you can expand it into a large scale, unless you truly put it through the same sort of rigorous design that science that we see vaccines being put today, and there is no reason where peacebuilding we can't challenge ourselves more. And so I do think that what we're doing today in Beyond Conflict, which is what we call a science-informed design, putting together science and practice to develop effective programs, that more projects in the peacebuilding world can look at how they can use rigorous methodologies and expand the knowledge that we have out there on how we can create more evidence-based projects. But I'd say, in general, for the peacebuilding field, we're not where many other sectors are, that we haven't really thought about how technology can be used to further peace. What about early warning detection tools? How can AI further strengthen them? If you think of a world in which funders can run hackathons to tackle peace building solutions like they do for water and sanitation, I'm sure we would be in a different place today. And I'm just hopeful and more funders would do that. After all, the SDG 16 is focused on the promotion of peaceful and inclusive societies. And I think there's a lot more that we can still do to achieve the related indicators. So, I would say for me, as a peace builder, there is definitely that dedication to rigorous designs, but I think there's so much more potential, untapped potential that we've just started to explore in the use of technology.
Thank you, Karen, for your insight and for your wish of one thing that you, based on your experience. And Branka, what is that technology for you?
Yeah, you can see that Karen brought a smile to my face as she was talking, because this is exactly what the conclusion of people who initiated AI for Peace was. And similar as Vidhya mentioned, how Moonshot CV was started just by seeing this gap in the field, and the fact that we as a peace building field are maybe not going so quickly and following the happenings in the technological field, most certainly not as quickly as business or different industries are doing, but also we are lagging behind even international development field or humanitarian relief and action field. So this was our motivation, and we actually wanted to see not only what that new technology would be, but what existing technology and how existing technology can be utilized to make our societies more peaceful. And I think innovation comes in different ways. So one of the innovative ways that I see technology can be utilized, not only to stop conflict or violence once they already start, but as both Vidhya and Karen mentioned, this sustaining peace moment. So I really hope that we can utilize technology to change this emphasis from stopping war or leading our societies to wars and then making them stop, but actually sustain peace and realize what are those elements in our societies, what are those institutional, structural things that we need to work on to sustain peace. And I believe that technology has a huge role in this. And there are many examples that I'm hopeful the technology can do this, as Vidhya mentioned, early warning and early action systems that function for many years already, but I believe that artificial intelligence is giving a new chance for this approach now, just because of the availability of big data and the processing power of our computers today. We are actually able to make these predictions in a much more accurate way and enable earlier action, which is crucial for these things. I'm very hopeful about the natural language processing as one of the technologies under this AI umbrella that can help us reach out to populations and have, again, we come back to this bigger inclusion just by being able to reach out to communities in their local languages or even local dialects. And I can immediately make a connection to Karen's point. These technologies can help us and allow us see the impacts and bring data to these impacts and then scale the things that are actually working on. And just one more sentence, a quick sentence. I just want to say that I am not personally a techno solutionist. I am coming to the tech field from the peace perspective. And I truly believe that there is not a technology that can solve a problem if the technology is not tackling deep causes of a certain problem. Technology can be a helping tool, and we as peace builders should see how we can use this potential. But we really, as a society, need to tackle deep causes of problems, and we need to change the underlying broken structures that are driving this status quo. And without changing the systems, we will not have this big change that we are aiming at. So let's look at technologies as a helping tool, but let's also be aware as a society that we need to pay attention to structural injustices and things that are not working on the structural level.
Thank you so much, Branka, for sharing with us all your valuable insights. Now we are really coming to the end of our session. Time really flies. I wish we have another 3 hours so we can talk way more and hearing the experiences, the insights, the inspirations from all of you. But just for the last words, could each of you say one sentence to the future female leaders who are thinking of stepping into the field of peacemaking, entrepreneurship, and techno-innovation? I'm pretty sure there are many, many young females who are so inspired right now, who are so encouraged right now. So could you just give them one last sentence?
Yeah, the one sentence I would say is don't let anyone talk you out of what you know you're good at and what you know you want to do in the world. There's going to be lots of people who will try and talk you out of it, but if you know it's the right thing and you think you're good at it, then you probably are.
That's wonderful. And Karen, please.
I love that. I would say something similar. It's just, you know, be at the table. Remember that people around you, as the more you sit at tables and you work and manage and lead projects, the more you realize that the others around you don't necessarily know more than you. So you just be confident and push through and follow your vision. Yeah, that's what I would say.
Thank you, Karen. And Branka.
Yeah, I would definitely be inspired with these sentences, and I would add a passion. Just follow your passion, and I think the good things will definitely come out of this. And don't be afraid that sometimes some things will not work out the way how you planned them and intended them. And failure, I think, is a part of this success path and the road. So each failure will be an experience that will bring you to something new. So passion, and don't be afraid, just go for it.
Thank you so much, Branka, and thank you also so much, Vidhya and Karen, for joining me today, for all of your inspiring words, for your amazing work. And I myself, I'm really honored to be able to host this session, to be able to work with all of you. And I'm pretty sure in the future, we would definitely have more sessions like this. And I hope we will have more people who actively promote the voices of female leaders like you. And with all of these efforts, all of these people, I really believe that the future we have envisioned before will come definitely sooner than we expect. But with that as the end, I think this is time for us to say goodbye to each other for now, and we will definitely see each other again. So thank you for joining us.